Welcome back. So now that we have a pretty nice HUD, it's time that we start actually sending information up to it from the C++ side of things. And I'd like to start with initializing our spell globes with the spells we have equipped. Now, so far we just have one offensive spell equipped. We don't have any passive spells. So we need to start thinking about a way to send data to this widget. Now, an example of something like this that we can look at is our attribute menu, because our attribute menu has widgets, each of which are identified with gameplay tags, and we're sending data up to widgets via the attribute menu widget controller, and we're sending it in a nicely packaged little struct that contains information about that given attribute. We're able to do this because we have a data asset. If we go to Blueprints, Ability System, Data, we'll see that we have this attribute info. And attribute info has an array, and each element in the array is identified by an attribute tag, and it contains information, the attribute name, the attribute description, and so on. Now we can follow this same pattern for our abilities. Our abilities can be identified by their ability tag. They can also have other information that we can send to widgets, which can then fill in what they need to fill in. In the case of our spell globes, we're going to need an icon and a background that we can fill in here based on ability information. So what we're going to need is our own data asset for ability info. And just like attribute info, we can create a struct to store that info for each element in our array that we'll put in there. Now we can go into our ability system folder into data and take a look at attribute info. Notice here we have a struct for the data to send up to our widgets. And we have a T array of those structs. Now we could use a T array, we could use a map, mapping F gameplay tags to structs. Either one is okay. But we definitely need a data asset, so that's what we're going to create. So we can create a new C++ class, and I'm going to put this in Ability System Data along with our other data assets. So I'm going to right-click, choose New C++ Class, click on All Classes, and search for Data Asset. Choose Data Asset, click Next, and we're going to call this Ability Info. So it's like attribute info, only it's for abilities. We're going to create the class, and somehow I got Visual Studio opened. So Visual Studio has opened with my new class. Interesting. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go to Edit and Editor Preferences, and just see if my source code editor has changed. Looks like it's set to Visual Studio. I like Writer U project, so I'm going to have to restart. Not quite sure how that changed. And now that that's fixed, I'm going to check, and I see that my data folder doesn't have my new class in it. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and close the editor. I do see the class here in Writer. So I'm going to force Writer to regenerate my temporary files. Mostly my intermediate folder is what I'm interested in. So I'm going to delete my intermediate folder and my binaries, and right-click my U project, open it back up with JetBrains Writer. And with that change, I'm going to go ahead and launch the editor. Okay, so we're back here in the editor. And sure enough, there's my new ability info. So now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and close again, and this time start looking at my ability info class. Now, the first thing I need is a struct. And that struct is going to hold some information about my abilities. It doesn't have to be complete yet. I'm only going to add things to it that I want to use right now. So first, let's create the struct. We're going to say struct, and I'm going to call it f_aura ability info. It's going to be marked with ustruct and blueprint type, and it gets a generated body. And we can give it a couple of fields here. Now, the first thing I want to give it is an F gameplay tag. And I'm going to call this ability tag, and this will be how we identify each of these abilities. That means I'm going to need to include gameplay tag container. So I'm going to go ahead and get that in here. And I'm going to assign a default value of an empty f gameplay tag, like so. And just like attribute info. In fact, attribute info has the gameplay tag for the attribute set to edit defaults only, blueprint read only. That's something I'd like to take, so I'm going to use that same exact U property. Now, in addition to the ability tag, I'm going to want a texture 2D for the icon and a material for the background, right? And that's basically all I need for now. So first, our icon. It's going to be a T-object pointer. It's going to be of type uTexture2D. I'm going to call it icon and set it equal to null pointer by default. And this could be a const uTexture2D if we like. We would put that right there in the angle brackets. And I'm going to give it the same U property. Now, in addition to a uTexture2D, I'd like a material. So I can use a T-object pointer. And a uMaterial interface is what I can use for this. That'll allow us to set it to a material. And I'm going to call this background material and set this to a null pointer. This can also be marked as const. And I'll give this a U property here. So remember, const means we can't change it at runtime. That doesn't mean we can't set it in the blueprint. Now, we can identify abilities by their ability tag, but we're also going to want to be able to assign abilities to input tags. In fact, we're already doing that with our Firebolt. It's assigned to the left mouse button input tag. I think this should be something that we have in here as well. So when this struct makes it to the widget can identify itself with the input tag and then match those up and set its own properties based on that tag. So I'm going to copy the ability tag and paste it and call this one input tag. So an ability can be assigned an input tag, right? And now that we have the f_aura ability info, we can create a public section in the class and make a T-array of these. So T-array of f_aura ability info structs, and this will be called ability information. And this will get also a U property, and I'm basically going to give it the same exact U property. The only difference is we could put a category here, ability information. Now, in addition to this array, I'd like a function that can retrieve the ability information based on the ability tag. So I'm going to have a function that returns an f_aura ability info struct called find ability info for tag, and this can take in a const f gameplay tag by reference, and I'm going to call it ability tag. And we can use b log not found, a boolean, but I'm going to set it to false by default. So if we want to be warned, if we can't find one, we'll have that. Now, find ability info for tag can get a definition. And here in the definition, we're going to simply find the ability info, right? We can do that by looping through our ability information. So I'm going to use a const f_aura ability info reference called info. For each of these in ability information, we're going to see if the info.ability tag matches the ability tag passed in, and if so, we'll return info. Now, otherwise, we'll return an empty f_aura ability info struct, and if we do reach beneath this for loop, if we never return from it, we can log if our boolean b log not found is true. So if b log not found, we're going to use a UE log, and we can log an error. Now, so far we've been using logtemp an awful lot, and I think that by this point, I'd like to have my own log category. So rather than using logtemp, it'd be nice if we had a log_aura. So our project is now serious enough, I think, to have one of those. So what I can do is I can right-click on Aura, go to Add, and choose File. And I'm going to have a Aura log channels.h. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to go ahead and create another file called Aura log channels.cpp. So I'm just creating them right here at the project level where aura.h exists. And in Aura log channels.h, I'd like to define or declare a log category. Now, in order to do that, we have to include a couple headers. We need core minimal. So I'm going to include that. And we need to include logging/log macros. Because I'm going to use a log macro, I'm going to use declare log category extern. And I can choose what my category name will be. I'm going to call it log aura. The default verbosity can be log. And compile time verbosity is going to be all. So with this, we're declaring a log. We need to define it in Aura log channels.cpp. And the first thing we can do is include the header file, Aura log channels. And then we can use define log category. And we have to define it, log aura. So with this, we now have our own log category that we can use. And here in abilityinfo.cpp, when we use UE log, now we can use log aura if we include aura log channels. As soon as I press comma space, there's Aura log channels. Thank you, writer. And I can log an error here. And the error is going to say, we're going to use text here. We're going to say can't find info for ability tag. We're going to go ahead and say what that tag is. So we'll use %s for a string on ability info. And we'll say the name of the ability info, this class that we're in. So first, we need that ability tag string, so we're going to use star ability tag dot toString. And then we want the name of the class we're in. I'm going to use get name safe, passing in this, like so. There's my semicolon, and we're now using our own log. So this is kind of cool. We can even go into our other data assets. Here in Ability System Data, we can take a look at attribute info, where we're using log temp. Instead of that, we can use log aura. Now, functionally, it's basically the same. The difference is it's not going to have log temp in the log. It's going to be log aura. Now, we're suppressing this log, but it's kind of cool that we have this now. Okay, so now we have a data asset. And this data asset needs to be accessible somewhere. And I'd like to use it in my overlay widget controller, as the overlay widget controller is going to be performing lookups and broadcasting information. So I'm going to go into UI, into widget controller, but I do want this to be my public folder. So public, UI, widget controller. I'm going to go into overlay widget controller and add a variable for our new data asset. So here in overlay widget controller, I'm going to go down into our protected section where we have our message widget data table. I'm going to place a new TObject pointer for my data asset. So it's going to be uAbilityInfo. We're going to forward declare ability info. So I'm going to put that up here. Class uAbilityInfo. And right back down to it, I'm going to call this ability info. And we have to set this from the blueprint. So I'm going to copy the U property for the data table. We can even keep it in the same category, widget data. In fact, both of these could just be in data, but that's fine. I'm going to leave it as is. And now we have ability info. So with that, we can create a blueprint based on our ability info data asset and set this ability info on our overlay widget controller. So let's go ahead and compile, launch the editor, and we'll do that. Okay, so we can create our new blueprint. So I'm going to go to Blueprints, Ability System, Data, and make our new data asset here. by right-clicking, going to Miscellaneous, and choosing Data Asset. And I can get my new ability info. There it is all the way up at the top. And I'll call this DA Ability Info. Now we can set this on our widget controller in Blueprints UI, Widget Controller, and BP Overlay Widget Controller. There's our new ability info. I'm going to set it to DA Ability Info. I'm also going to browse to it and open it up. And here's our ability information. I can click plus to add an element to it, and here are the fields. Now we can set this, but we don't actually have an ability for our Firebolt, do we? So we need to set that. And then we can set the input tag, the icon, background material, and all that good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and close Editor Preferences. I'm done with my Overlay Widget Controller, but I'm going to keep Ability Info open and just go and make that native gameplay tag for our ability. It's going to be in Aura Gameplay Tags.h. And just under Attack and Summon, I'm going to make a new ability tag for my Firebolt. I'm going to call this abilities_fire_firebolt. And I'll have a category of fire spells. So let's go ahead and create that. And it's going to be right here in abilities. So I can copy and paste and change abilities, summon to abilities firebolt, and call this abilities.fire.firebolt. And this will just be Firebolt ability tag. And that's it. Now I can compile and launch, and I should have my Firebolt ability tag. And I can use that now. Okay, so getting my data asset back open, now I can set my ability tag to abilities firebolt. Now, input tag, I could just go in here and set it to the left mouse button, right? But this is actually something that should be set from code. I actually don't think it needs to be exposed here to the data asset blueprint. I think it should be set in code. It should be looked up from the ability itself, because this can change. So just like our current value of an attribute, we did not expose that to our data asset, attribute info. I'm actually going to unexpose input tag and get that out of here. But icon we can set. I'm going to set it to Firebolt, that texture, and we can browse to it and remind ourselves, here's what it looks like. And for the background material, I'm going to look up Fire Skill BG, that material instance. So now we have the data for this data asset. And the last thing I can do is unexpose input tag. So I'm going to save all, close the editor, go back to abilityinfo.h. And for the input tag, I'm going to remove edit defaults only, but we can still access it from the event graph with blueprint read only. And with that, now we have our data asset, and our widget controller has that ability info variable that we've set. So it now has the ability to look up data based on an ability tag. So we're one step closer to broadcasting this information, one of these structs, up to our overlay widget. And in fact, we can just broadcast it, not specifically to the overlay widget, but just broadcast it. And any of our globes can be listening for that broadcast, and the left mouse button one is going to update itself with the background and the icon there. So we need to code all that, and that's going to be in the videos to come. Now, attempting to compile, I see that flog category log aura, we have a struct type redefinition. Now, this is indicative of including this header file more than once, and so our log category is being defined more than once. Now, we can easily fix that by going back to our aura log channels.h and making sure that we have a pragma once here. Pragma once is something that we kind of always take for granted, but it makes sure that we never include a header file more than once. If it's already been included, or if something in here is defined, it's never going to be redefined. So adding a pragma once will save us there. Excellent job, and I'll see you in the next video.